Vikings Report with Drew and Ted and Chris and Tootses. Look, we got a quick show this week, so we're not doing a movie. We're not doing anything. Drew, how are you?
I'm doing great.
It doesn't matter. Shut up. Chris, how are you?
It
doesn't matter. Shut up. Ruby, how are you? It doesn't matter. Shut up. Look, we're not doing an intro. We got to do it quick. Nobody cares about your fantasy team. Ruby, put it up. Okay, there's nobody cares about your fantasy team. If you don't know the rules, it's too late to play because it's like 15 weeks into the season, whatever it is. All right. That said.
Jesus, I feel like Tony Montana.
Say hello to my little friend.
Shut up! If you haven't figured out, we're doing a turbo show tonight. Drew's setting his bomb timer. We got some Vikings news and info. We're going to do it when we get to the news. One of the reasons we're going really fast is because Robert W. Farnsworth is really quick. He has to hop on a train up to Molly, Minnesota. His brother just got back from the war. He's a tail gunner on B-17s in the European theater. So we got to get him going really quick. So hang on. Hello, everybody. Robert W. Farnsworth here. This week, our scintillating Minnesota Vikings return home to U.S. Bank Stadium after what seems an eternity to take on the suddenly struggling Arizona Cardinals. Will they cook them like a turkey, or will the Cardinals rise from the ashes like a phoenix? We'll find out. We're going to roll right into our preview. It's kind of an abbreviated show this week. As always, by the way, Chris is back with us. I didn't mean to cut you guys off. I kind of did. It was sort of a joke as we started the show. Chris, welcome back.
Back due to a lack of popular resistance. Happy to be here, as always.
Pretty important quarterback news. It's Kyler Murray for the Cardinals. That's not the news. But for the Vikings, pretty significant news. They signed Daniel Jones. Sam Darnold's the Vikings quarterback, obviously. And between the two, Darnold's pretty much better than Kyler Murray is this year in pretty much every statistical category. But Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, the last we saw him against, well, I guess we saw him in week 1, but prior to that, he was carving up Ed Donatell's defense like a Thanksgiving turkey in the 2022 playoffs. But they signed him for the rest of the year as essentially a backup. I'd assume right now he's on the practice squad, probably going to be at some point elevated to the active roster. I assume once the Vikings get to the postseason, which I hope they will, at 8-2, hopefully 9-2 after this week. Chris, do you think he comes back, or is this just kind of insurance for this year and then hope to get a comp pick out of the deal next year if he signs with somewhere else?
It might be a little bit of both. I mean, Sam Darnold's pretty much priced himself out of being Minnesota's quarterback potentially next year. The only quarterback the Vikings currently have under contract for next year's team is J.J. McCarthy. No Nick Mullins, no Brett Rippon, no Sam Darnold, and no Daniel Jones at the moment because he's just signed for the rest of this year. It gives the Vikings an opportunity to look at him. And basically, at this point, Kevin O'Connell is Derek Zoolander. He's opened up the Kevin O'Connell School for quarterbacks who can't play good and want to learn how to do other stuff good too. So if there's anybody that can actually turn this guy around and get something out of him, it's Kevin O'Connell. And whether he's back next year, whether he walks, whether he's J.J. McCarthy's backup or whatever the case may be, there is literally zero downside to this signing for Minnesota.
Between the two, though, you're taking Kyler Murray or Sam Darnold.
Oh, absolutely. You must be this tall in order to get the check mark, and Kyler Murray doesn't quite make it there. So, yeah, it's Sammy Darts this week.
All right, Drew. First of all, who are you taking, Darnold or Murray, and what are your thoughts on the Danny Dimes signing?
Happy to be back.
Kyler Murray won't be the one standing tall in this game, Chris.
Oh!
But then again, when is he ever? I'm taking Darnold too. You know, Murray, we all know what he brings to the table. He can beat you with his arms, his legs, but all you have to do is go back and look at that Seattle game last week to figure out what they need to do. That should be the blueprint for Brian Flores. Murray threw the ball 37 times. It's the most he's thrown all year. He only ran 2 times for 9 yards. That's not their game. Their game is running the football, and they couldn't do it. Murray was on a pretty good roll there for a while, but that last week he threw a pick six, and after the pick six, the whole team was just dejected. They were down in the dumps, and they weren't going to come back and win. And telling you what, Sammy's back. 3 straight road games, passed for more yards than he's passed all season, 330 last week against the Bears. After he combined for 5 picks against the Colts and Jags, he's back on track and back in black. Back in black with the last 2 games throwing no interceptions, Ted. Last 2 games. Got that look coming back, and this is all about Sam Darnold for me. The Vikings, I will say, the 2 losses they had this year were versus experienced quarterbacks with Goff and Stafford. So Murray's no slouch, but I think he's got a lot to deal with this Vikings team. So I'm taking Darnold.
Thoughts on Danny Dimes?
He's an insurance policy for this year. Once he comes in and learns the coaches, the players, the system, I think he'll be somebody you can go to and win games. Not that Nick Mullins isn't, but I think Daniel Jones is a better quarterback. Whatever they decide to do with him next year, Darnold won't be here. Darnold's going to get his last big paycheck, which he deserves. He's built his chip stack back up. He'll be gone. I don't know what's going on with Mullins. And who knows, if JJ has to miss a month, he might be starting the season with Daniel Jones. But I don't think if the Vikings are 4-7, they're making this signing. But they're in it. They're in it to win the Super Bowl, people. Don't listen to all the negativity. Well, listen to it if you want. They're 9-2. They're in it to win the Super Bowl, Chris Gates. Why not pick this guy up as a insurance policy in case something happens to Darnold?
Absolutely.
I will say one of the funniest tweets I saw on X or Twitter, whatever it is we're calling it now, is imagine this. Sam Darnold gets hurt in the playoffs. They're playing the Falcons, and Daniel Jones comes in and leads the Vikings down for a late touchdown to give them the lead, and Kirk Cousins and the Falcons get the ball back, and on 4th and 8, Kirk throws short of the first down, and the Vikings win. I'm still laughing about that. I saw it earlier today. Anyways, I thought it was weird at first, but look, it is absolutely no risk signing. The Giants are picking up, unless they put Jones on the active roster, they're picking up the bulk of Jones's $11 million salary for the rest of the year. I think when the Vikings do go to the playoffs, they'll put him on the active roster. He's going to need time to learn the offense, so it'll be a while before that happens. It's added insurance in case J.J. McCarthy's knee doesn't heal properly, but by all accounts, that's going along fine, even though he had that scope or whatever the heck it was. All right, running game. Drew, tell us about the running game between the Cardinals and the Minnesota Vikings.
Well, the Cardinals kind of rely on that running game. They're 6th in the league in running the football, which is pretty good if you're 6th in anything. Did you see the day that James Conner had last week?
I did not.
7 rushes for 288.
Really?
Not yards, Ted. 7 rushes for 288 inches.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what James Conner got on the round. 288 inches, which equates down to 8 yards. 7 rushes for 8 yards. You can't win with that. James Conner was Jell-O salad last week, which is something people eat on Thanksgiving. I don't understand it. I like Jell-O, I like salad, I don't like them together. Usually the Cardinals' running game has been pretty effective all year, but at 140 yards a game. But last week something went haywire with them, Ted. They could only manage 49 yards on the ground against the Seahawks, who give up 130. So I don't even know what the hell they were doing. They were trying to run in the interior all day, and both of the defensive tackles for Seattle just kept pounding and pounding and pounding them down. Really, Connor and Murray, that's about it. If you stop those guys on the ground, you look what happens. They couldn't even get a touchdown last week. And they just come off 4 straight wins. But those 4 straight wins, they ran the football effectively. Flores knows if I shut their running game down, it's not going to be a good day for them. I'm giving the Vikings a check mark. They're still leaky gravy balloon, the Cardinals, on the run defense. 119 again.
Leaky Gravy Balloon?
Yeah, have you ever heard of Leaky Gravy Balloon?
Is that like an album that you guys produced when you were still in a band?
I saw Leaky Gravy Balloon open up for the Eurythmics once at the Fargo Civic, I think.
Leaky Gravy Balloon, that came from chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavored water. Simple, don't you know that stuff? Come on.
Chris, give us your thoughts on the running game comparison.
James Conner was so bad last week, I'm surprised he wasn't on my no one cares about your fantasy team squad, to be honest. I mean,
Chris, you got to get one win, Chris. Come on.
it's not going to happen. I'm so screwed. But the Vikings got the running game back on track last week. Aaron Jones had 126 total yards. Yeah, he had the fumble at the 1 yard line, but he was breaking off chunks of yardage. Cam Akers has provided some nice help in the running game as well. I think it's a pretty easy check mark for the Vikings here. Like I said, James Conner's a nice running back, but the Vikings still have the number 1 run defense in the NFL. And yeah, I don't see the Cardinals solving that in this one, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm going with the Vikings too. The Bears had a pretty good run defense going into the game last week, and the Vikings went into Soldier Field, and they pretty much dominated. The Vikings got a second half rushing touchdown from a running back, which ended the longest drought, I think, since a team that no longer exists in the NFL like
Yep.
Dayton Staleys or whatever the
The
hell they're
Dayton
called.
Triangles.
Dayton Triangles, thank you very much. Like from the Great Depression. So, yeah, I'm going with the Vikings here. Chris, tell us about the wide receiver comparison.
Well, I mean, the Vikings have figured something out. I mean, in regulation last week, Justin Jefferson had one catch for 7 yards, and he had the 120-yarder in overtime that got them to almost midfield, which was pretty huge. But the Bears were focused on shutting down Justin Jefferson, and in the meantime, Jordan Addison went over 100 yards, T.J. Hawkinson went over 100 yards, and this team's figuring out now that Hawkinson's back. Even if Justin Jefferson isn't open all the time, there's so much attention focused on Justin Jefferson that a lot of other guys are going to be able to do a lot of other things. JJ's going to get his eventually, but this kind of diversity and spreading the ball around is only going to help this offense. So I know Marvin Harrison Jr. is a good young wide receiver and whatnot, but the Cardinals just don't really compare to the Vikings as far as pass catchers are concerned.
Justin Jefferson is better than Arizona's wide receiver number 1, Michael Wilson. Jordan Addison is better than, right now, Marvin Harrison Jr. And what school did Marvin Harrison Jr. go to, Drew? That's right, Ohio State. Who's going to stop a mud hole in Michigan's ass on Saturday?
Never beat Michigan. Marvin Harrison Jr. Go ahead.
Sadly, he didn't. No, he didn't. I was looking at this today. When you add up the stats of T.J. Hawkinson, Johnny Munt, and Josh Oliver, they compare pretty favorably to Trey McBride, who in his own right is one of the best tight ends in football. But now that Hawkins is back, I'm giving the receiving game hands down to the Vikings. Drew?
My receiving check also goes to the Vikings. The Vikings are heating up. Last week was just like the first game of the year when they showed all their JJ didn't do anything, but look at the rest of the team. When JJ gets involved, it's going to be crazy. The Vikings offense is starting to get scary, which is a perfect time because come the end of the season, we want to be rolling in that department. No matter what happens on the defense, we want to be getting 35, 40 points a game. JJ Addison coming off his best day ever as a pro. Hawkinson heating up now, guys. 17 catches his last 3 games. Minnesota is on their way to being Eric Coryell, baby. We remember Eric Coryell. Kellen Winslow, John Jefferson, Charlie Joyner.
Yeah. Chuck Muncie.
And Wes Chandler.
Chuck Muncie was a running back, too.
Yes, he was on cocaine weekly.
And he had glasses very similar to mine, by the way.
Yeah, he played in the Saints for a long time, and then the Chargers got him, and Dan Fouts loved him. Anyway, Jalen Thompson is banged up, strong safety. I don't think the Vikings will have any problems passing the ball down the field. Arizona does things a little weird there, which I don't really agree with this. The offense runs to the tight end, McBride, which is strange because when he was at Colorado State, we did our draft write-up, the offense ran through him there too. So maybe just carrying over from the Colorado State days. He's an exceptional tight end. He's an exceptional player. They got trounced by Seattle last week. He still had 10 catches for 100 and some odd yards. But they run their offense through the tight end. He has 80 targets on the season, and Harrison has 66. Now, if I'm a head coach of a team and I have Marvin Harrison Jr., my targets are probably going to go more to him, Chris, than the tight end. That's just me, though. What do I know? What do I know? Apparently not a lot. And let's keep in mind what Cole Kmet was doing last week. If they let Trey McBride run around like Kmet was, that was Cole friggin' Kmet. If you let Trey McBride get in a groove like that, he's going to end up with 150 and 18 catches. That's what they're going to attack. They're going to try to run the ball. Their main target is McBride. But overall, the Vikings receivers, we got a big advantage with receivers in this game. I'm going Vikings with my check mark.
All right. Offensive line. Big question mark for the Vikings. Cam Robinson was hurt. He left the game early in Chicago. Practice report I saw today, he was limited, so it looks like he's trending to playing, which is good. Paris Johnson is the left tackle for Arizona. He's probably their best offensive lineman. Jonah Williams played for the Lions. That's probably their 2 best offensive linemen. I'm not sold on their O-line, although Paris Johnson did go to Ohio State. Who's going to stop a mud hole in Michigan's ass this weekend? I'm going to give this to the Vikings, although since they replaced Ed Ingram with Dalton Risner, he has not been that impressive to me. It's pretty much close to a push for me, but if Robinson plays, I'm going to give the edge to the Vikings. If Quessenberry plays, I think the slight edge goes to Arizona, Drew.
Kyler Murray didn't have any touchdown passes last week, but he had one called back. Why was it called back? because the guy that's going to stop a hole in Michigan's bunghole had a holding penalty. You didn't mention that. Wait, you left that out.
I didn't watch the game. Didn't know. Didn't care.
Holding penalty. Took it off the board. There you go, Ohio State. That's what you're used to.
That's what he did against Michigan, too, so whatever.
With Darrisaw out, and the rest of the O-line's been looking shaky to me. Maybe it's just my eye. Maybe I'm shaky myself, but I'm going to give the Cardinals a slight edge with the O-line. Why? Because before last week, Chris, the Cardinals had allowed 15 sacks all season. Last week, they gave up 5 to the Seahawks. Anomaly? Was it a weird thing? I would say so, with only giving up 15 in the previous, 10 games? Still, 20 sacks allowed in 11 games is pretty damn good. I am going to give them the slight edge on the offensive line. Minnesota has to get back on track, Ted. Am I wrong about being a little shaky? They seem a little shaky.
That's why I'm real close, because last week I didn't think they looked very good at all against Chicago. But Chicago, again, I think it's a much better defense than Arizona is.
Well, they have to earn my check mark back. They have to earn it, Vikings. I'm going to the Cardinals O-line.
Chris?
I am going to have to lean towards the Vikings in this one here, I think. Brian O'Neill has continued to be outstanding at right tackle. There's no issue there, but if Cam Robinson is able to go, I think they have the advantage at the tackle spots. We've been not sold on the Vikings' interior offensive line forever, but I don't know if the Arizona offensive line on the interior is that much better. So it's basically a coin flip, but if I got to go one way or the other, I'm just going to go ahead and give it to Minnesota.
Drew, there was some news with the front seven with Ivan Pace going on IR and some other moves they made with the personnel. Why don't you go ahead and kick that off and talk about the front seven and compare those two units?
Let's get the player stuff out of the way first. Pace did go on IR. Big loss for the Vikings. A great player, great playmaker. The Vikings have the best starting linebackers in football. The best ones on one team. They brought in Jamin Davis, who I did a draft right up on 4 years ago when he got drafted in 2021, taken 19th overall by the Redskins. Yeah, I still call him the Redskins. He was amazing at Kentucky. He was an amazing player, Ted. Versatile, could play anywhere. Linebacker, middle, outside, anywhere. I thought really a can't-miss guy. And I think he still is a can't-miss guy. But he has a lot of issues off the field. He's gotten into some trouble with the law, and that's probably why he didn't end up working out in Green Bay. They cut him. Redskins cut him. Green Bay got him. And 3 weeks later, he's cut. He's waived, and we take him. But when you're 235 pounds and you're 6'4" and you run a 4.4, people are going to start noticing you in college. And I noticed. I started watching tape. The guy was a gamer. Total motor, total high motor. I love this pickup because somebody's got to straighten out his head and get him on track with his head on the off-field stuff. As soon as they do that, this guy could end up being a signing that we once a year from now say, remember that guy? We got him to fill in for Pace. Now look at him. I don't know if he's just going to be here for the 4 weeks that Pace is out, but he's every bit of as high a ceiling guy as you want to get. Get this. In 2023, leading tackler with the Redskins, 104 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. They switched him to defensive end. Why would you do that? I don't know. He's a stand-up outside linebacker rusher guy. That's what he is. He can play inside or outside. I don't know what's going on with the off-field stuff, but he's a first-round pick. But I don't think it's his production that's fallen off to where he's a bust. I think this is somebody we can work with. I'm excited to see how he does. Seriously, the Vikings have a big advantage. Don't you guys think?
I absolutely agree. I like the Davis signing too. The guy's an athletic freak. He's got the speed. He's got size. I mean, like I said, I don't know why Washington was trying to convert him into a defensive end. Things that they're doing over there, I don't know. But I remember going into this season, we were super worried about the Vikings' defensive line. And that entire unit has just kicked ass this year, whether it's Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, Jerry Tillery, even the backups when Jalen Redmond gets in there and gets some run. Still waiting for the Levi Drake Rodriguez experience to really get underway. It hasn't happened yet. It'll happen eventually, but Drew's already touched on the linebackers. I mean, the loss of Ivan Pace is significant, but I think Davis can replace him. Maybe not fully replace him, but at least be a part of the rotation. Blake Cashman is back to what he was doing early on in the season. Grenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, even Brian Asamoah, after Tillery blocked that field goal last week, he was out there weaving through traffic, got the Vikings to midfield. The Vikings, if they're not the best front seven in football right now, there are not a lot of teams ahead of them. So, yeah, got to go with Minnesota.
I'm not happy that Ivan Pace Jr. had to go on IR. If you force me to pick between Grenard, Pace, Cashman, or Van Ginkel, one of these guys has to go on IR. I would pick to lose Pace for 4 weeks. We saw what happened to the Vikings defense when Cashman went out. We know what Van Ginkel does on the edge, just absolutely disrupting plays to the edge, short passes. Teams have quit passing short screen. I mean, after his second pick six against the Jets in London, teams no longer try and even run screen passes to the running back or tight ends. They just quit doing it. They don't even do it anymore. Grenard is an absolute disruptor coming off the edge with pressures and sacks. And the other thing I wanted to mention is we thought this year's undrafted free agent, Gabriel Murphy, was going to be Ivan Pace from last year's undrafted free agency class. And it was kind of weird what the Vikings did. They activated him, and then they released him. Chris, can you explain that? I don't really understand the whole point of activating him and then releasing him.
I can't, to be honest. When they opened his practice window, they had 3 weeks, so they had to do something with him by today when we're recording the show, so Wednesday. Yeah, they had to do something with him, otherwise they would have had to put him back on IR.
For me, when I was looking at the name, I'm not going to say anything about Barrett Browning. The only reason I knew his name is because he went to Ohio State. Zaven Collins, I think, is probably their best player on the front seven. But yeah, the Vikings. I take the Vikings front seven. Okay, now, Chris, tell us about the secondary.
Like we said earlier, Drew's already touched on Jalen Thompson being out, potentially being out, at least being hobbled, injured for this one. Budda Baker is one of the best in the league at his position, but other than that, there's really not a heck of a lot to be super scared of with the Cardinals secondary, I don't think. On the other hand, we've seen what the Vikings have done in the secondary all year. Byron Murphy continues to be solid. Stephon Gilmore, Josh Metellus is all over the place, and Cam Bynum and Harrison Smith just continuing to do what they do. The secondary checkmark has to go to Minnesota here, I reckon.
You talked about Budda Baker. Drew's cousin, Sean Murphy Bunting. Other than Budda Baker, he's probably their best guy, I think. You look at the versatility of a guy like Josh Metellus, who beat Ohio State 2 or 3 different times, is a great player for the Vikings. It's hard not to pick the Vikings secondary here. They're 28th in pass yards given up, but I think a lot of that goes back to the Vikings' run defense. It's very difficult to run against the Vikings, and teams have to go to the pass fairly early because they have really very few options left. And when you do that, the Vikings are first in the NFL in defensive takeaways. They're a ball hawk in secondary. They are getting interceptions. So I'm going to go with the Vikings here. Drew?
I am going to give the Vikings a check mark, but let me tell you something. I'm going to have my eye on these guys Sunday very closely, Ted. And when Drew's got your eye on you, you better perform.
Uh-oh.
Or somebody's going to be hitting the door and hitting the hallway because I am going to be watching them closely. The Vikings secondary.
Do I need to get my pen and take some notes here?
Yeah, go ahead. The Vikings secondary, I don't get what they are, Ted. Are they schizophrenic? Are they bipolar? What happens to these guys?
I don't know.
Most interceptions. Vikings have the best fourth down defense in the league. They have the best run defense in the league. When it comes to these guys in the secondary, they just go to pieces sometimes. And I don't get Will Levis went from Christian Ponder to friggin' Dan Marino in a matter of 2 quarters. Caleb Williams turned it on in the 4th quarter. They have these moments of craziness where they look, I'm going to call them the schizophrenic boys. When you look at the players, look at the guys in the secondary. Murphy, Griffin, Gilmore, Metellus, Hitman, Cam Bynum. These are all B+ or better players. Every one of those guys. But they seem to go in the tank in portions of games, and it's really concerning. But I'm going to give them the check mark this week, but I'm going to keep my eye on you. Good answer. Good answer. Budda Baker, like Xavier McKinney and some of these other guys, just don't even go near him. Stay away from Budda. Don't go near him. Don't tempt him. Don't try to squeeze one in the window. Don't do it. Chris Gates, stay the hell away from Budda Baker.
Absolutely. There's not a whole lot else to be scared of there, so yeah, I agree.
I don't want to see these lulls in the secondary anymore, man. I am burned out on seeing that. I don't want to see it. They're better than that.
For the red zone, I'll go first. Look, the Cardinals don't get down in the red zone very often, but when they do, they're 8th in offense, they're 8th in defense. The Vikings have more red zone touchdowns than the Cardinals do, but they're not very efficient when they get down there. They're 21st. Their defense is 27th, but they're pretty good about keeping opposing offenses from getting to the red zone. But when they let offenses get to the red zone, they let them score. That said, I'm going to give the check mark to the Cardinals here because they're good when they get into the red zone. They're good at keeping teams out of the red zone. But I just wish the Vikings would be more efficient on both sides of the ball when they're on offense and defense in the red zone. So I'm gonna give it to the Cardinals here. Drew?
Does Kyler Murray sit at the kiddie table for Halloween? I mean, for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, because the kiddie table is closest to the TV, so he's probably playing Call of Duty while he's eating his mashed potatoes.
My red zone, I'm just going to let the numbers play it out, Ted. The Vikings are 21st offensively, 27th defensively, which you mentioned. The Cardinals are 8th in both, defense, offense. I'm giving it to the Cardinals. I'm just going to base it on the numbers on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to kind of go basically the same lines that Drew did, although with TJ Hawkinson getting back and finally getting into the groove of the offense, it gives the Vikings a lot more red zone options than they previously had. Doesn't look like Josh Oliver is going to play again this week, which, surprisingly is a big negative for them given the way he's performed this year. But yeah, the Cardinals are a lot more efficient when they do get into the red zone. Kyler Murray has a way of keeping plays alive and letting guys get open when they get into the red zone. So yeah, we'll give Arizona the check mark for this one, I think.
Alrighty. Special teams. I didn't skip it this week. Drew, why don't you start off with special teams?
Ted, you're moving up in the world. Very good
trying,
job.
Man. I'm trying.
One thing to mention about this game coming up, you got Hawkinson and McBride. Those are two of the best tight ends in football, and neither has a touchdown. And I know Hawkinson missed a lot of time, but he's due. I don't think McBride has one touchdown all season, even though he has a bunch of catches. So my special teams, Vikings have to earn back the check mark, guys, from that hideous display at the end of the game versus the Bears. Ted, I don't just give out check marks like it's Halloween candy. Both teams are on their backup kicker right now. Ryland's in for Prater. Thank God Prater's not kicking Chris Gates because he has 56 for 56 on 70-yard field goals against the Vikings. I mean, that guy.
That dude never misses against us. Like ever.
No, and half of them were like from outside the stadium. Vikings have to earn it back. Cardinals get my check mark, even though their punter is named Gilligan.
So if the Cardinals punter is named Gilligan, if he like shanks a punt, does Jonathan Gannon like hit him with his hat or whatever and just be like, hey. Jonathan Gannon wearing a blue shirt and white pants over there on the sidelines or whatever? But no, I mean, Drew's right. I mean, the special teams were not great. I mean, credit to John, Parker, Bartholomew, Gilligan, Romo, however many. It's like McLeod Bethel Thompson. He has like 8 names. I don't know. I guess he wants to go by Parker, Romo, whatever. Dude hasn't missed a field goal since he came to Minnesota. He did miss one extra point, so he's been solid. But like Drew said, the special teams last week were just so terrible that I can't in good conscience give the Vikings the check mark this time around. So give it to Arizona.
Really? I mean, they blocked the field goal? Romo didn't miss a kick? I mean, Soldier Field is a cow pasture.
On top of an Indian burial ground.
On an Indian burial ground that's visited by aliens. I mean, Romo didn't miss a kick. They blocked the field goal. Brandon Powell had like punt return yards. I don't know.
43.
Nobody cares about punt return yards.
You talked about Chad Ryland. He is also 13 for 15 on field goal kicks. What I found interesting, the only 2 field goal kicks he's missed is from 40 to 49 yards, which is kind of unusual for field goal kickers in this day and age.
Yep.
So if he lines up for a 44-yarder,
he's gonna miss.
I don't know. Maybe he'll drop it like Drew trying to close the deal with Ginger. I don't know. No, I'm picking the Vikings. I like Romo. I mean, he handled pressure well, kicking outdoors on a crappy field, crappy stadium, hit the game winner. I mean, granted, it wasn't a very long, but it was still to win the game. So I'm giving it to the Vikings here. All right, coaching, tell us about Jonathan Gannon and his Bird Gang. Chris?
I mean, he used to be the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. I believe he helped get them to a Super Bowl a couple years back, and then he took the Arizona job. He's a solid coach and everything. Right now, if Kevin O'Connell isn't the NFL Coach of the Year, I'm not sure who's ahead of him, unless you want to put idiot Campbell from Detroit on the list ahead of him for whatever reason. I wouldn't. But Kevin O'Connell is right now a top 3 coach in the National Football League, top 3 head coach, and Jonathan Gannon is not. And Brian Flores factor comes into play here as well. I'm not sure who the coordinators off the top of my head for the Cardinals are.
Drew Petzing is the OC, and Nick Rallis.
Former Gophers linebacker Nick Rallis, the defensive
Oh.
coordinator there in Arizona. Jonathan Gannon is a decent enough coach, but I can't give the Cardinals coaching staff the check mark over the Vikings. This is an easy one for Minnesota.
Yeah, I will never be able to get over Gannon. The Cardinals social media team put it out like not too long after his introductory press conference. The very first thing he said is like, "What up, bird gang?" And I was like the most ridiculous thing I had ever seen. And then last year, the Cardinals managed to go like 4-13. And look, he took over a terrible situation from Cliff Kingsbury. I get it. He's got the Cardinals to 6-5. Last week, they were going into the game. They were 6-4. They were in first place. They lost at Seattle, like we've talked about already. They are now, because of that loss, they are now out of the playoff picture. They went from first place to 8th in the NFC and currently out of the playoff picture. So they're going to be desperate for a win to stay in the thick of the playoffs. I like Gannon. He's really turned the Cardinals around this year. I thought they had a good draft last year. But, yeah, KOC and Flores are I think, the best coaching tandem. Well, I mean, Detroit's got a good coaching staff too, but Vikings. Drew?
I'm not going to give the coaching staff the check mark to the Cardinals because the Vikings are on fire. They've had a lot of experience with this roster. Flores and KOC, they know every player on each side of the ball and what they can do. They mesh really well together as coaches. And I'd really like to see them stay together after we win the Super Bowl. It would be good to have them both back. But I will say this, Gannon's the right guy for the job over there in Arizona. Arizona is one of those teams, Ted. They've been bad for a long, long time. They shuffle a new guy in. New guy. Let's get this guy. They have good draft picks, and then they trade him away. And he's the right guy for that job. When he was coordinator with the Eagles, like Chris said, he was a top 10. He had top 10 defense both years he was there. But one thing he doesn't stand for is turnovers. He doesn't like offensive turnovers. In 8 games, his first season with the Cardinals, they had 0 turnovers in 8 games. Turnoverless games. 8 turnoverless games, if that makes any sense. They started out, 2-4? Then they got on a winning streak. They won 4 straight. He is not happy about that Seattle game last week. The Cardinals look like crap, and they got handled by the Seahawks, who aren't that good.
Yeah, they started out 2-4, then they won 4 straight, got to 6-4, and then they lost 16-6 last week at Seattle.
A horrible loss last week.
Yeah.
And I know Gannon is going to regroup his team and look to them to have a little fire under their asses after that hideous performance last week. And it wasn't just Kyler Murray and the coaches. It was everybody. But Flores and KOC, check mark. Every week, check mark. They're getting better and better and better. And Gannon just needs more time there.
I think so, too. I agree. I think he's the right guy for the job. All right. Then everybody's favorite category, intangibles. The Vikings just came through a brutal stretch of their schedule. When you say, well, look, man, it was Jacksonville. Who was the other? Tennessee, and then Chicago. But it was 3 road games, and they won all 3. And it was the first time, I believe, in franchise history that they won back-to-back-to-back road games.
Yep, it was.
That goes back to the heyday of the Purple People Eaters. You say what you want about the level of the competition and say what you want about the quality of the games, but they won. And those are games in past seasons they would not have. Kevin O'Connell has got this team believing in themselves and believing that they will find a way to win. He's got Sam Darnold playing like a number 3 overall draft pick. That mid-season slump or swoon that he had where we thought, ooh, geez, is Sam kind of reverting to the New York Jets version of Sam Darnold or the Carolina version of Sam Darnold is pretty much over. I mean, Darnold threw for, 330 yards last week and a couple of touchdowns. Yeah. The defense, other than those mental lapses in the secondary you talked about, Drew, they're figuring it out. Now they return home for 3 straight games, I believe, against the Cardinals, the Falcons, and then I believe the Bears again.
Yep.
So it's a chance to cement not only a playoff position, but hopefully catch and maybe even with a little bit of luck surpass Detroit in the division. Then they've got Green Bay and Detroit coming up. And the Cardinals have everything to play for too. Yeah, a playoff spot. It's going to be a good game, and it's going to come down to what team is more prepared to play and what team is more prepared to win in the fourth quarter. The Vikings have won more one-score contests since Kevin O'Connell became the head coach of the Vikings, I think, than any other team in the NFL. So take that information for what it's worth.
So who gets the mark on your intangible?
Vikings.
Darnold has that look, Ted. He got it back at the end of that Bears game.
He did.
That last drive, completing 3rd down and 10, 3rd down and 12, Third hits Hawkinson. He got it back. Last week, he had that look. Not the look of throwing picks, but the look of I'm back to kick your ass. I like the look in his face last week. And this is why I'm giving the Vikings the intangible mark on this. The look by Sam Darnold in combo with the home team has won the last 9 games of this series.
Really?
Boom! Roasted! Check mark, Vikings.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, this is the U.S. Bank Stadium advantage is going to come back into play here. This team has been on the road for almost a month now. Haven't played at U.S. Bank since the Sunday nighter against Indianapolis. Like you said, three games in a row on the road in the NFL. It's damn near impossible to win games on the road 3 weeks in a row. The Vikings did it. They're 9-2. They're trying to keep up with Detroit, and these fans are going to be pretty unhinged, I think, once we get to Sunday afternoon. So, yeah, I think the Vikings are a pretty easy check mark in the intangibles category this week.
All right, Chris, how do you see this game playing out?
I think the same way a lot of these games have played out. I think the Vikings are going to jump on the Cardinals early, get themselves a lead. Something weird's going to happen at some point midway through the third quarter to make this game closer, and it probably needs to be. But by the time the game's finished, I think the Vikings probably win this one by 2 scores.
Drew?
I have them covering the spread, 3.5, but really not by much. I mean, you never know what you're going to get with Kyler Murray. Can the Vikings secondary play a full game, and can they control the McBride of Frankenstein? I mean, do not let that guy get loose. Control the run. They don't have enough weapons or enough a handful of crucial plays, Arizona, to beat us. They don't have enough talent to beat us. Don't give it away. Play a full defensive game. And I like the Darnold look. They got it back. I like Chris's 2-score game, but it wouldn't surprise me if they won by 2 scores, so they're going to cover the spread. But the one thing I don't want to see is that ridiculous wide receiver screen. My God, can you stop that play? Minnesota has a lot of weapons, and they're going home to that frenzied crowd.
For me, Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams are similar in that they are capable of making a big play once they get out of the pocket and can scramble. Caleb Williams did that last week, that just ridiculous freaking clown throw down the sideline that got him like first and goal. That ridiculous clown throw down to Keenan Allen that was reversed because Allen's pinky toe was out of bounds or whatever it was. If the Vikings can keep Kyler Murray from making those just stupid clown plays, the Vikings should be fine. I don't think the Cardinals are going to be able to run the ball. Conversely, Minnesota got their running game on track last week, finally. And I think that's a huge part of their game. You saw last week, they were consistently throughout most of the game, they were 2nd and 3, 2nd and 4, and they were moving the ball. And they were able, because of that, they were able to get explosive plays down the field. You had that big play to Jordan Addison to set up, I think, their first touchdown. Then they had that big play to open the second half to Jordan Addison. But when they got behind schedule, you mentioned Sam Darnold was like, I don't care. F it. 1st and 15. Big throw to Hawkinson. 2nd and 11. We got a first down. 1st and 20 again because of the holding penalty. Dump off to Jones that got it 2nd and 10, and then another pass to Hawkinson. And then a big play to Hawkinson down the field to kick the game-winning field goal. So the Vikings should win this game, and they should win this game, I would hope, by at least 10 points or more. That's my prediction. All right. That's it. We will be back on Sunday after the Cardinals and Vikings game to talk about it and hopefully talk about the Vikings going to 10-2. For Drew, for Chris, for Ruby, I'm Ted. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you Sunday. SKOL Vikings. Go Bucks!
Ah, stop it!
You walked right into that one, dude.